Texas lawmakers adjourned sine die on Monday, and many are still catching their breaths after a long 140 days. State Representative Gene Wu, though, chairman of the House Democratic Caucus, is joining us live from Houston to talk about the session. Chairman, we thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
You know, how would you describe the session? I conducted a panel with some local lawmakers from the Austin area. It happened to be all Democrats. That's who said yes and agreed. And they did not use good words to describe the session. How would you describe it?
So this is my 7th session. I've been in office for over a decade now, and by far this is easily one of the worst sessions I've ever been a part of. Not only did we have just enormous, endless battles over sort of like nonsense issues that don't really matter to Texans, but we didn't work on the things that we actually need to work on. We had a $16 billion hole in the education funding, and we filled it with $8.5 billion, right? And so many things that needed to get done simply were not even discussed.
Yeah. When you and I talked the first day of the session, we talked about what Democrats would be working to do, how you all thought you might be able to stop. You were hopeful then that you were going to be able to stop that education savings account bill. It didn't happen. Share your thoughts now that that is going to be the law of the land.
So we Democrats supported what like the overwhelming 3/4 of Texans supported, and that is a strong opposition to voucher scams, to say that we're not going to take money from the poor and give it to the rich so they can put their kids in private school. It just makes no sense whatsoever. We thought that the overwhelming majority of Texans calling in, writing, coming to testify, meeting with the legislatures, we thought that would be enough. And it was not enough to push back on the wants and desires of 4 billionaires who are happy to throw money after money to make this happen for them. It is a deep shame for this state that our leaders capitulated to what the billionaires wanted against what Texans wanted.
You know, you talk about what Texans want, and so I feel like that's just a great segue into a bill that is on the governor's desk, a bill to ban all consumable THC. We are seeing a lot of people from all across the state really asking the governor to veto that bill. Do you think that's going to happen?
I really hope so. And I don't pretend to tell the governor what to do, because he generally does whatever the opposite I tell him to do. But this is one of those things where this is bad juju for everybody. We've told people again and again during the debate that Texans overwhelmingly, by like 3/4 and more, oppose the banning of something that has been legal for the past 5 years. That's something that consenting adults are able to use, something that Texans have come to enjoy and rely on and make it a part of their lives. It is a terrible idea to go ahead and criminalize it and ban it, and just make criminals of everyday people who just want to just live their lives.
Yeah.
Once again, the Texas legislature under Republican leadership consistently does what the people do not want them to do, and they do what the billionaires, what the donor class wants them to do. At some point, people have got to speak up and say, no more of this.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the House had such a different version, right? The House kind of recognized that perhaps there is an issue here. Let's regulate some of these products. Let's put in more regulations. But that plan really got squashed.
Yeah. No, look, the House lives in 2025. The House of the Representatives operates like it's 2025, and that we have sensible data on medical information, scientific information. We can make sensible decisions about these things. The Senate and the version we went with, the Senate lives like it's 1984, right? That we're still in the last millennium, I'm not sure even the last century, the last millennium, and operates like it's still reefer madness. And everyone's just scratching their heads how can you be so backwards in 2025? And that is a real question that people across the state need to start asking themselves. Why do they keep voting for the people who act like it's the last century or the last millennium?
You know, you were very outspoken against Senate Bill 17. This is a bill that will restrict land ownership for people in the state of Texas. I know you have a lot of concerns about this bill.
I mean, speaking of things from the last century, I mean, not even the last century, the century before that, SB 17 was a revisiting of a law that was passed by this state in 1891. We passed this exact same law in 1891 banning Japanese people and Chinese people from owning property in the state. You can't own a home, you can't own a business, you can't even own farmland. And it was not repealed until 1965. And here we are, 100 years later, passing the exact same law for the exact same reasons against the exact same people. The real fear of this is that this is a stepping stone to revisiting the Japanese internment. That we're going down the same pathway again and nobody's even blinking an eye. It is deeply shameful. And good people around this state should stand up and say, like, this is ridiculous that we're doing this again.
I'm sure there will be legal action, legal challenges to that once that bill is signed. You know, I have to ask you, getting off a little bit of this past legislative session and talking about some news that's just happening this week, the move from the DOJ and the Attorney General of Texas to end in-state tuition rates for Dreamers all across the state. What's your biggest concern with the way I think the Attorney General handled this situation?
So time and time again, Democrats keep telling people when they talk about the illegal immigrants, when they talk about criminals that they're trying to get rid of, they're talking about Dreamers. They're talking about everyday immigrants. They're talking about people here who are here without papers, but they have been here for 20, 30 years and have done nothing but do what they're supposed to do. They're talking about people who have just made their lives here and done what they're supposed to do. And this attack on Dreamers, on the kids who are going to college, who are doing what they're supposed to be doing, who are making our society better, who are trying to improve themselves, that's the people we're going after. That we're going after the Dreamers. We're going after college students, right? We put this law in place 20 years ago because we thought it was the right thing to do, because it was morally correct, because it was correct from a philosophical, from a public policy perspective, that we want our kids to be educated no matter what their immigration status is, because they're going to be here anyways. And it's more important for them to have an education, to have good jobs, than necessarily to make grandstand and make political points about immigration law, right? That's the whole point. And we're going back on this. We're going backwards again.
And interestingly enough, a Republican-led legislature did pass that bill back in 2000.
Yes. When Republicans were still having their full mental faculties and they could see beyond their political talking points and can see what actually is necessary for the state, they do good things. And we long for the days when those Republicans come back, but more and more you're watching them being driven out across their party.
State Representative Jean Wu, chair of the House Democratic Caucus, we thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.